One of the key points in the Benedictine tradition that comes up again and again is this idea of containing your desires. And I think this links nicely to the technology that we have that constantly satiates our desires instantly. And I'd love to pick your brains on this. There's this trend that's emerged on the internet called monk mode. Have you heard of this?
Funnily enough, I just heard of it the other day and I was intrigued, really. So tell me a bit more about it.
So there are different communities on Reddit. They call themselves the monk mode communities. And there are certain rules that are essential. So here we go. Meditation, 10 minutes daily. Exercise, 30 minutes daily. You have to avoid substances, no alcohol or drugs. And you have to limit the social interactions. Avoid meeting people outside of your girlfriend and mother. What is a monk's perspective on monk mode?
Well, actual monks share some of those disciplines of monk mode, but by no means all of them. For example, we kind of invented the modern drinking of alcohol historically. We're some of the greatest brewers and winemakers in history. But more seriously, we would add in connecting to the other members of your community. That's the big difference. Never mind just girlfriend and mother. And of course, we wouldn't have a girlfriend either. So at the level of relationships, I find that quite interesting that what they're focusing on is a rather sort of personal lifestyle issue about, I'm going to contain my lifestyle and put disciplines around that. Now, the question I'd like to ask them is, why are you doing that? Is there any indication of their motivation?
I question this a lot. And obviously, you could say that part of it's just jumping on a trend that's already existent. It's often pitched by these big tech millionaires that live an Instagrammable life, and they attribute their success to things like monk mode and locking themselves away in their bedroom and working online and reading the stock charts daily. So I think an element of it is chasing success.
Right.
And what's quite funny now that I say that out loud is that that's pretty much antithetical to the lifestyle of a monk, because they're chasing success, which in their paradigm is defined as money and people being jealous of the money that they have.
So monk mode is about getting rich.
I'd be cautious of summarizing it in that way, but from what I've seen, a lot of the time, monk mode is a means to the end, and the end is having more material success.
Okay. Well, the context of real monk mode is quite different. The ultimate goal of the Christian life is to inherit the kingdom of God. But the early monks and nuns who inspired St. Benedict said that seems rather far away. So let's come to a nearer goal. And the nearer goal is purity of heart. Now, this is a very alien expression in contemporary culture. The notion that one of the goals of life is to have a pure heart. And immediately it's associated with sexual purity. But in the monastic tradition, it includes that, but it's much broader. It's about having pure intentions in life. And it's based on the teaching of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, where he says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." And that's how the monks connect it to the kingdom of God, saying, well, if you want to see God in the kingdom of God, you've got to have a pure heart, because that's what Jesus says. So then how do you obtain this pure heart? And then the response comes by prayer without ceasing. To pray without ceasing. And that's the immediate aim of the monastic life. And so the immediate aim of everything is to enable constant prayer. So that's why we have, periods of silence, periods of intense silence. So at night time, we have the great silence. And all of it is about this. And this is not just saying prayers. It does involve a certain amount of saying prayers, but it's a meditative attitude to life, which facilitates a pure heart and seeing God.
And it might sound really obvious to you, that you should aim to have a pure heart. But I promise you it's not to someone watching this in Gen Z. Can you make the case for me of why someone should aim to have a pure heart? Why shouldn't they just aim to do the best for themselves, get to the best material circumstances, and if they have to do over a few people along the way for their own benefit, that's okay?
Yeah.
What's the case against that?
Well, we haven't spoken much in this interview so far about the teaching of Jesus, but this would be a good moment, I think, to talk about it. So the Hebrew tradition that Jesus inherited as a good Jew of his day was very clear that there were two great commandments, to love God and to love your neighbor. And the introduction of the word love immediately raises the question of purity. Namely, is my love a pure love? And I think contemporaries can understand this. A girl might say, oh, the boys are only after one thing. And that would be a statement of saying they haven't got a pure love for me. So I think we understand impure love and we understand pure love. So the notion that to love other people for themselves is, I think, something that contemporary people can understand. And in his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus spells out the people who are blessed by having certain qualities. And there are people who have who are poor in spirit, people who have purity of heart, even people who mourn, which is a really interesting one. And what he's really doing is he's saying those who are not the most gifted in this world's terms are in fact the most blessed. So it's an overturning of contemporary expectations, in fact, worldly expectations at any moment in history. And he's really saying that if you want to be truly blessed, by which I would interpret, if you want to have the ability to love purely, to have a selfless love, then actually what you'll find this selfless love among people who are in quite bad situations, which is completely counterintuitive. So someone who's mourning is actually in some strange way more able to love purely than someone who's not. Someone who's poor is more able to love purely than someone who's rich. Someone who has, a deeply good intention, a pure heart, is going to be blessed in a way that those who are scheming to do better, to diddle other people and so on. So it's in Jesus' teaching, he extends the teaching of the Hebrew Scriptures by turning upside down the worldly expectations of his day and our day. And I suppose that's his understanding of where we look to find people with a pure heart. And that those of us who are not in those difficult situations will do well to enter into relationship with such people. It's one of the most powerful challenges I've seen is somebody said, I can't remember who it was now, some quite famous person who said, you say you love the poor, name them. That's really good. In other words, do you actually know people who are in that distressed situation? Can you name them? Do you have a relationship with them? And what he's saying is that our purity of heart will grow insofar as we are connected to those who are most in need. And that again is perhaps counterintuitive, but I think we do know that. Endless people will tell you how, the volunteering they do in the homelessness center, the volunteering they do to teach kids who are behind in their reading, all of these volunteering opportunities, they'll say how much it enriches their lives. I've even had people who've said to me that, their involvement being on the board of governors of their local primary school is the best thing they do in their life. And they look forward to it in a way that they don't look forward to going to their work. And there are signs that this teaching of Jesus is not counter to our own knowledge of the way life works. And so this purity of heart as a goal is something which actually people, it seems to me, who do the volunteering, they're understanding that actually that's a great way to be blessed, is to volunteer to work with those most in need. And I think that, therefore, there is an intuitive understanding of it. I think what's missing is a public expression of saying, this is the goal. This is what we should be aiming for. We should not be endlessly stimulating your desires for more and more stuff. We should be stimulating your desire to have a pure heart at the service of God and others.
Going back to this resistance of desires that seems to be what both real monk mode and online monk mode strive for, I think a commonality is this idea of go sit in your cell and your cell will teach you everything. Yes.